Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm the Stratch Professor, and today we're going to be looking for the support tier list in patch 14.14. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. It's usually starting most nights around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going until about 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have been starting a little bit earlier on some days, and occasionally we do a little afternoon stream if I'm off and Jason's off on the same day. We'll do a little stream there as well. And I'm going to try to start doing some more tier lists and do some more guides and things like that. Because I know I've been, falling behind on that over the last few months, really the last year or so. I've kind of cut back a lot. But I'm going to try to get back into it. I'm going to try to find some time and start bringing you guys some more content. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. And let's just start with the patch notes just really quickly and just talk about like what pertains to the support role. And I'll try to do some tier lists, at least for ADC and maybe jungle. And I might take a look at the solo lanes too, if I have time, but I'll see if I can throw out at least a couple of tier lists. And I'm going to try to make this shorter. It needs to be about 30-35 minutes. That's what we're going for here. Okay, Ahri won't matter for support. Aurelion Sol probably won't matter too much. Bard. This is actually pretty big because it's per 5, you're losing 4 damage. And you do have an AP bonus, but you really don't want to be building a lot of AP on Bard. It's just really awkward because your R doesn't have any AP ratio on it at all, and your W, like your heal, is very minor. So they're trying to force him to stop building as tanky, which that's like his whole thing, is he's able to, kind of gank, and he has a lot of CC, potentially, or like unique forms of CC, I should guess, with his ultimate, or I should say, and with his Q. So he has to get in close to auto attack, and he does pretty good damage. If he has all of his meeps up and he walks into a fight with like 7 meeps in the mid game, he's going to do quite a bit of damage for a support. And that allowed him to roam a lot, get stuff like Dead Man's Plate, or I'm blanking on the name, but like the support version of it that came out, and then he could get Frozen Heart. So Locket, he could get a lot of good utility items because the itemization didn't really matter on him too much, because he just gets so much damage off of his passive. So the fact they're knocking this much damage off, and 4 damage per 5 may not seem like a lot, but he could easily have 50 chimes, whatever, in the mid game, and that's going to be 40 damage off every auto attack. So it's a lot. It's a huge nerf. And then they're nerfing his Q too, which is typically the first thing that you max. So 20 points off of that. So it's like, they want him to have, if you have north of, it's going to depend, but you definitely need north of 100 AP. So you're looking at 1 item and some change to get enough AP to kind of counteract this damage nerf. They did give him like slightly better attack speed and stuff like that, but I still think it's going to matter. So he was already like niche. You had to be really good at him, and he was good in some matchups, but I think this will definitely nerf his damage quite a bit, which is sad because he is a really cool champ. Okay, Fiora's not going to affect support. Alawi's not going to affect support, I don't think. Jace, as far as like overall meta shifting things, these are just champs that are changing. Casante's getting a lot of changes. Now, I don't know if this is going to make him better or worse, because he's getting more damage, but he's slower, is my vibe on him. But I've never played him, and he's extremely complex, and he's been changed probably over 100 times since release, like, literally. There was one patch where it was like 60 or 70 changes in one patch. So, I see him in a lot of games, but I just don't understand. I just don't have enough experience to understand the complexities of how much this slow matters. Typically, when people start messing with stuff like moving slow, like just completely removing slows and making your movement speed and like animations feel a lot clunkier, typically that's really bad. Like, I know that happened to Rakan for a while there. They like changed his W speed from like 2100 to like 1400 or something. It was incredibly slow. Like, that was Rakan's worst he'd ever been when they did that. I think it was like season 10 or something. It was so bad. And then they ultimately kind of reverted it and found a compromise that feels okay. But yeah, again, I don't know how much he has to do this and how much this matters, but it could be bad for him. So that would definitely disrupt the tank meta top and lead to more carries top, which could lead to, potentially more split pushers. And if that's the case, then you want supports that could roam and, participate or help stop split pushers or whatever. So stuff like Janna or things that are going to get, a lot of movement speed items and stuff like that are going to be better. And things like mages and some enchanters that can't protect themselves during rotations are going to be weaker in those types of situations. Because mages, like Zyra and Brand, they want 5v5 team fights. They don't want to have to try to run down a Tryndamere in the side lane and help out with that. They're just going to probably get killed. They don't want to be having to walk through the jungle by themselves or going to get picked off by, Kha'Zix or any jungler. So that could change the meta if tanks like K'Sante can't stand up to split pushers, or they can't do it for as long, and there's even more split pushing. There's quite a bit right now. Then again, that's going to favor high mobility champs that are relatively safe, which is good for Rakan, which is what I like. But that could be meta shifting because he is a pretty big piece of the meta puzzle, especially at higher elos. Okay, Kai'Sa getting a little bit of a buff. Probably won't matter too much for bot lane. Her win rate's pretty atrocious, but I think if you're good on her, you can still make her work. It's just her itemization just seems pretty bad. Yeah, I just don't think it's going to move the needle that much. Okay, Kalista. This might matter at higher level play. I don't think it's going to matter in solo queue. Decrease. She's already pretty bad, at least in, lower than diamond solo queue, which is what I cover, sort of low diamond minus. So already rough. It just takes her way too long to kill people. The meta is so fast, you just don't have time to stick a lot of these champions with a ton of items. You just have to have really, really good mechanics to make her work. Okay, Lulu, a little bit more damage early on in lane, and then 20 extra damage on her point click E. That's a lot. 260 on just a point click. It is short range though. And then 260 on the shield. And this wasn't previewed, I don't think. They were just talking about these two changes. They also gave her a little bit more AP scaling on Wild Growth. So she doesn't get a ton of AP, but, she really does like to get Ardent Sensor. And she can get things like Staff of Flowing Water, Shirelias. I mean, there's a lot of different items that she can get. So she does typically build AP items, so she'll get a little bit of benefit out of that. But her win rate has not changed that much now. This is extremely early days. This is the first day that it's out. But if you look at the PBI, I think she's still hovering around 40% or something. Not 40, 50%-ish. 47. And she's picked a lot, so that's not really a good sign. It could be people that just aren't used to playing her. And she's not that difficult, to be honest, but if you misclick your E and accidentally shield a minion, or if you damage an enemy assassin that's trying to dive your AD carry instead of shielding the AD carry, that can be really bad. So, misclicking the shield is a real thing. But nevertheless, she's not that hard of a champion to play. So the fact that she has a low win rate just means that her numbers aren't that great. I mean, the big problem with Lulu is everything is so close range. You're really vulnerable to getting hit by collateral stuff, just things that are splashing around. And if you have to step up that close, you can get targeted and blown up. She's obviously very squishy. Doesn't have a lot of escapes. You really have to use your W and then hit them with a Q and just hope you can escape from things. She's pretty slow. But, I mean, if you pair her with some of these hyper carries, you get her with an Ardent Sensor and put her with a Fed Vayne or a Fed Jinx, Twitch, Kog'Maw. If you put her with the right stuff, she can be good. But I think just blind picking her, especially into ranged, harassment champs, which is very common right now. Stuff like Jhin Zerath, Misfortune Zyra, stuff like that. She's going to have a really hard time in lane. Okay. So she has really good offensive capabilities, but your ADC it really revolves a lot around the ADC, and they have to be pretty far ahead for her to really start taking off. Maokai getting several nerfs, and I thought this might lower his win rate a little bit more, but it looks like it's still 55%, so I've still got him S tier. Because they aren't really hitting too much about what makes him good. And he still just has a ton of CC. You can't avoid his W. That's one of the biggest things. If you flash W somebody, or you have Trailblazer and you're able to get in range and you W somebody, they really can't get away from that. Now, they can flash and pull you under tower, but you're going to get on them. And that's mostly still there. So the armor is down a little bit. This can matter in some lanes where you're getting harassed a lot, you're trading a lot. But typically, you're not that aggressive a lot of times early in the laning phase in most matchups unless you get a gank. So you're not going to be hitting a ton, be getting hit a lot by the minions. They lowered this by 5. It's like, who cares? 5 damage on Bramble Smash, doesn't matter. And then Nature's Grasp. Now, this is the one that I thought might matter. So lowering it from 2.6 to 2.25. I mean, that's quite a bit. That's like 3 point, whatever. 3.05 or 0.35 or whatever. It's like a third of a second. And that's a lot in CC time. Especially when you start factoring in Mercury Treads and stuff like that. Now, that's only if they've been CC'd for, 1,000 units. But still, if they get hit by this, max range, it's 2.25. Then you're going to root them for another, second or second and a half. And then you're going to Bramble Smash them for Q, which is going to displace them and slow them down. So they're going to be hard CC'd for 3 seconds still. It still has a massive hitbox. And they're going to be slowed at the end of it. That's enough time to kill most people. So he's still going to be pretty good. And he still has, really good scouting with the seeds. They did nerf those last patch, so they're not quite as impactful as they used to be. They do cost a little bit more mana, but he's still going to be really good. Okay, Rek'Sai, I don't know. We're just going to have to see how this plays out. I just don't play her enough to matter, but it looks like they are trying to make her smooth out her curve a little bit, so she's not as brutal in the early game as far as damage, but she scales a little bit better. I like how they don't even try to describe it here. They just say everything changed. And a lot of this, kind of like I talked about with Cassante, is scripting changes, changing the way that abilities behave and timings on changes. And it's just really hard to understand exactly how impactful that stuff is unless you play the champion a lot. So hopefully this is good, because in all my games I've had a Rek'Sai, it's just, she's almost always horrible. I know that Meteos is a fan of her, and I could see really high level players being able to play her well. But stuff like this, remove the 500ths of a second hitch when manually casting Tunnel. It's so she's taking this 20% faster. So stuff like that, I just don't know. That sounds really impactful, but is it? I don't know. So we'll see. I don't know what her win rate is. I won't look it up. I don't think it's going to change how supports work that much, though. Okay, Renekton, couple of buffs on him. That's probably warranted. That's good. He kind of keeps some of these other scaling split pushers in check in the early game. Okay, then Smolder, probably not going to change. She's still scaling, still going to be pretty strong. Couple of quality of life things. Okay, I think that's fine. I think she'll continue to be strong for people that know how to get her stacks. That's the main thing is, do you know how to set up the minions? Are you getting the right items to just maximize and get to that 225 stack somewhere between the 20 to 25 minute mark? That's what it's all about, I think, with her. Otherwise, I feel like she just plays a lot like most other caster ADCs. It's just, can you get to that 225 mark or not? It's a very, very big deal. So you got to get the right items. You got to do the right minion prep. You got to have the right, back timings and rotations and recalls. You got to keep farming and get those stacks up. Okay, Soraka, a little bit of extra movement speed, helping with Star Call. They're fixed a bug with E. They lower the cooldown on that. That's pretty significant. She'll still be okay, but the problem with Soraka is she's still hard countered by Grievous Wounds, and she still doesn't have a lot of CC outside of the silence. So if you have a lot of tanks on your team, or you just kind of want to go all in on a sustained lane, just to make sure that you, win the lane, win the 2v2, just counteract maybe early aggression from ranged AP chance or something. She does neutralize a lot of lanes and just forces farm offs. And she does scale really well, especially if they don't have Grievous. But it's just, she's extremely vulnerable when she's, by herself trying to ward. So her vision game is really weak. If you have to rotate a lot, like I talked about earlier, through the jungle, through rivers, stuff like that, you get picked off incredibly easy. And you can't start team fights, and you just don't have a lot of CC and peel outside of your ult. So she's just a very extreme champion. In the right circumstances, she seems incredibly OP. If you can't get to her and she just gets to hang out and just heal everybody in a fight, it's like ridiculously strong, especially without Grievous. But if she gets flanked, or you need to peel an assassin off the AD carry or whatever, she's going to have a harder time with that than some of the other supports out there. Okay, Thresh got several buffs. Base armor, E damage increase, R cooldown. I like how they're lowering the cooldowns on these. Really, the standard cooldown on most supports should be like 120. I think, unless it's like a global thing. Like Soraka's 150 probably makes sense because it's global. Like you can influence top or mid lane without even being there. But a lot of this other stuff, just why he randomly has 140, his ult frankly sucks compared to a lot of other like modern, tanks that are being played in the meta, like Nautilus, Leona, Rakan. All of them have much more CC and much more reliability with the ult. That thing doesn't even stun. It's extremely close range. It has a delay on the cast, and the damage is like okay. It's all right damage, but it's just a slow, and it's got a cast time, and it's just very easy to avoid. So, yeah, it definitely should be lower. So, I don't know. I hope Thresh comes back in the meta. I don't think this is enough. I think he's still extremely squishy for a tank, especially in the early game. Yes, he does scale with souls, but the other champions all scale regardless. They all get, like, more armor than him per level. I don't think he gets any per level. And stuff like Nautilus and Leona are going to get, like, 3 armor per level. So, it is possible if he gets just a billion souls that he could be tankier than them, like, at level 12 or something. But I don't think so. But he is still extremely versatile. They're just trying to give him some damage on the E. What he needs is they just need to rework, just not mess with his armor. Just give him, like, real armor, like a real tank. Like 40 plus armor. And then just change the scaling on the souls, either to just raw damage, just augmenting his attacks or something. Or just make it the AP or whatever. And just give him, like, actual baseline armor. Don't hold him hostage for his tankiness based on those souls. And I think that would be a huge help to him. Okay, Twisted Fate, couple of nerfs. Probably not going to matter too much. This is mostly for AP Twisted Fate, not AD. So AP's not played in the bot lane too much. It's probably still okay. Varus, 2 AD nerf. I mean, that's a meme. Sometimes it does completely knock ADs out of the meta. I don't think it's going to matter too much with him. A lot of his damage ultimately is going to be on hit. Right, it's going to be Blade the Ruined King with Ginsu's late game and, like, his blight stacks and things like that. So, like, his base AD, I don't think is going to matter as much, especially because he's not building crit and things like that. Okay, Volibear, several buffs. You're not going to see him in the support role. I love how they're lowering the cooldown because, again, this should not be 160. That's ridiculous. They're probably doing that because they just think that the tower negation is, like, an incredibly powerful effect, but it's an extremely weak effect, as we've seen over time with that old item. I can't even remember what it was called. But, yeah, he needs some buffs, and I like this. This is good. Don't think it affects support. And then Zyra, baseline damage is down on the plants. And that doesn't look like a lot, but that's quite a lot early game. Percentage terms, that's 20% less damage, level 1. But they're making her do more to monsters. So they really want to make her, like, a potential jungler, like Brand. That is pretty nice. Extra 20 damage early on. But I mean, she's doing all right. She still has a pretty high win rate. I wish they would just make her plants more consistent. Like, just change her W completely and her passive. Just give her some other real abilities. And then just every time you hit somebody with like one of your abilities, then it spawns a plant under them. You hit them with a Q, it spawns a range plant. You hit them with an E, it spawns a melee plant. That's it. And then just give her real abilities for other stuff. I would like that a lot more. Okay, Cleaver stacks faster. Not going to matter for most supports. I don't think Senna gets this day and age. I don't think Ashe does either. Both of them have in the past, but probably not. So there's a handful of champs, obviously, like Urgot. Maybe Graves will get this more often. I don't think it's going to affect the meta too much. Hullbreaker, mostly for top lane. That change, I think, is probably just relevant for Urgot. Hydra's probably not going to matter. Stridebreaker's not going to matter as far as the meta goes. Terminus, this could be good on stuff like, I've seen like Vayne's get this, maybe on hit Varus. So on hit's probably going to be a bit stronger. They've nerfed it, or they've buffed it several times, different on hit items. So I don't know. This seems like it's pretty good though. This seems like it's pretty good, especially for hybrid champions like Varus. I don't know if Kai'Sa would ever get this, But like Varus does do quite a bit of physical damage and magic damage, so he would definitely benefit from the double pen. Something like Kog'Maw as well does a lot of hybrid damage. Vayne could get this. She does physical and true damage, so it doesn't help her out with the true damage, but either way, it's probably fine. Support item stuff, it's going to stack a little bit slower. I think that's okay. You do get it very quickly in general, but you are going to get some extra health at the end, and you do get some extra regen at the end, so that's probably pretty good. I'll have to play and see how this feels, but I don't feel like that's going to be a massive deal. You might get it, 1 minute slower or something like that. Okay, Bloodsong getting nerfed again for ranged amplifications. A lot of champs are running this that are meta, that are like these aggressive early laning champs. Obviously it's going to hurt like Senna, Bard, Ashe. There might be some other ranged ones that I'm missing, but again, it doesn't look like a lot, right? But if you just look at it in percentage terms, that's 17% less damage, so that could be pretty significant. Solstice Slay, I think Rakan is really the only one that gets this. There might be a couple of other big tanks that get it. I think a lot of them get the Celestial Opposition instead. But this is a nerf early game, so 7% of a user's max health is going to match 120 health at something like 1700 HP. And then the flat movement speed. See, on the tooltip, it doesn't say decaying in game, because I just played with this last night. So if they're adding decaying, or if it's just implied that it decays, I hate decay, because, like, what does that mean? How much are you losing? I wish they would just do a flat number, but I guess decaying does give them more, like, flexibility with how something works. This is going to be one of those where I'll probably have to feel it out to see, because movement speed is incredibly strong. Frankly, this heal on Rakan, who uses it, doesn't matter that much, because typically you're starting the fight, with your R plus W, and it's just going to be an overheal on either you or your person. If you're saving somebody, the heal can matter. But it's one of those situations where a lot of times that heal is going to get wasted anyways, because you're doing your CC so early in the process. It's the movement speed to track people down or to help people run away that could be relevant or not. And again, the numbers wise, this looks hot. So if they have 350, that's going to be more than 90. That's going to be like 100 total movement speed, but it decays over 3 seconds instead of 4. So I don't know. We'll have to see. Rakan does have a lot of other good options, though. You can still do the bubble thing, which a lot of people hadn't been doing, but I tried and I thought was pretty good. Or you could just do Celestial Opposition, and that'll probably be fine too. This is going to nerf some of the like AP champs pretty significantly with their damage with the Zazik. So for solo queue, it probably matters. I don't think there were a lot in pro play that were probably doing this. I could be wrong about that. But yeah, that's going to nerf like your Brands, your Zyras, stuff like that. Lost Chapter getting a few more of these things. So any of these champs are going to get a little bit better. That are kind of these mana champs. They buffed a lot of things with them. I think they buffed Seraphs, they buffed Rod. So a lot of like your Cassiopeias, Anivias, TF. I don't know if he still gets Rod anymore, but a lot of those types of champs are going to like these changes. Lethal Tempo got changed from melees. It's not going to matter for most champions. I'm sure there's a few, maybe Master Yi or something that cares about that. Okay. All right, let's get into the tier list, because I do want to make sure that we get a little bit of time here, at least like 15 minutes or so for a tier list. So not a lot has changed since my last tier list. Sorry, I know I didn't do one for 14.3, but we've got 14.4 here, and it's still very similar to how it was. So Rakan is still very good. I don't know. I could definitely see... You could put Maokai number 1. He's going to have the highest win rate. I still think Rakan has some of the highest ceiling if you play him well and his versatility. But Maokai is still really good. So either one of those is fine. I wouldn't argue if someone wanted to put Maokai number 1. But Rakan is still really good. So they did change Sled, which is a thing. That will affect Rakan. But he's just so... flexible. There are a lot of other things he can be getting too. Let's pull him up here. So it's early days. His win rate is about the same. It's maybe slightly lower from where it was. He was at 54% a few patches ago. The big thing I think that has brought him down a little bit is the prevalence of these ranged champions in the early game. I think he's one of the better tanks into that in solo queue because he gets that shield that refills constantly. Your Q can heal you and your ally, and it's a very cost-efficient heal. It's a really nice heal. Like, it's better than like a Sona heal early on. Probably not better than a Soraka heal, but it's really good. You just have to make sure you're hitting those Qs. And you can, get into stuff like Mercury Treads if you need to in the early game, which he really wants anyways, because one of the main ways you die as Rakan is you get chain CC'd before you can move. That's like the worst case scenario. So he really wants Mercs in a lot of situations anyways. So I personally think he's pretty good against some of these range champs. I mean, I guess if you wanted to, you could look at his win rates versus different things. But yeah, this is, what you're seeing is a bad matchup against Janna, which is true. Bad matchup against Maokai. If you get Mercury Treads and you play around him, like, you can do all right. But yeah, historically, that's kind of a bad matchup. And Senna's pretty bad because she just can kind of farm you, and it's hard to threaten her early on. But as you can see, just the rise of a lot of these very popular range champions. Lux, stuff like that. He's actually quite good into Morg. People think that Morg's a hard counter to him, but this looks fairly accurate in general. But yeah, everyone's just playing these ranged, either poke or like scaling mage type of champions, and he can have a difficult time getting bullied and pushed in a tower early on. So I think that's what's suppressing him a little bit. The nerfing of Zazak is gonna help him out quite a bit, and the nerfing of some specific champions in lane, like Zyra, like these other things, are fine. But I think a lot of it is people just don't know how to play those matchups early on. Like, you can out-roam those champions. A lot of them do not move from the lane very well. The Zyras, the Brands, that type of thing. So if you go, show up to Grubs or rotate mid or things like that, you can usually get around them. And then it's really in the mid to late game where he takes off. If you don't give them a lot of kills, he is way, way better at rotating, starting fights, getting vision, sort of just navigating team fights than they are. They really just have to have like those 5v5 fights most of the time and not get flanked in order to, feel strong. So anyways, I think he's good. Extreme versatility, that's kind of the name of the game with Rakan. He does still like to get the Trailblazer early on, and I do like this a lot. It does help, especially there's so many things to rotate for. You've got double Grubs and Rift. Before 20 minutes, you got the Dragons. There's just so many things to run around on the map, and giving that extra 15% bonus movement speed to your allies is a big deal when you have people coming with you for rotations, or even just on backs. Just getting back to the lane, a few seconds faster can sometimes be a big deal if you get the push to get the wards or get priority for Dragon or whatever. So this is still an incredibly good item, even after it's been nerfed. I'm not a big fan of Zeke's in general. It's okay, but a lot of times he doesn't want to stand in there unless you're 100% dominating the fight. You don't want to stand in there and get hit. Usually you go in, you start the fight with W, Q, auto, and then you just like E back out, and then just kind of wait on your cooldowns. But this does have a good stat line, nice, well-rounded. It's got health, the mana's kind of whatever, but it's got armor and ability haste on it, which is a big thing. And adding that damage in is pretty nice. But the big thing this lacks is the ability haste. So it's less ults, you have long cooldowns, your E and your W are both like 12 seconds. So the movement speed is nice, but lacking the ability haste is kind of lackluster. Locket is really good too. That has the best stat spread of all of them. So it's got armor and magic resist and health, but it doesn't have that movement speed, and its marquee ability is only around every 90 seconds. It is very good, and I like this on Rakan, but I've tried it out, and I think it's usually better as like a second item. I haven't really tried a lot of Shirelia's, but I might try it out if they don't have a lot of damage on their team, you're not afraid you're going to get blown up, or if you want to go for like Celestial Opposition and like a defensive boot or something like that, maybe you could get away with Shirelia's. But this would be very good, especially for running down people in side lanes if there's going to be a lot of split pushing or rotations, or you just have a team that dives really well. Shirelia's could be a pretty good option. And then Frozen Heart, if they have like 3 or more auto attackers, is still good even after the nerfs. And then usually you'll just get all those items, just the order that you get them in can vary. I think that getting something like Knight's Vow, I've been getting this third, if I'm not really sure what I want to, top it off with, but I just personally want to be a little bit tankier and just add a little bit more protection, like guaranteed all the time. If there's been a lot of skirmishes, I think Knight's Vow is really good. So the most common thing that I get in a lot of games is Trailblazer, Locket, Knight's Vow, and then typically like a Mercury Tread boot, just so I get that magic resist and Tenacity. But there are, so many different options. Locket plus Redemption is very good for team fights if you're just going to have like really important explosive 5v5 team fights, especially if they have like a lot of AoE damage, Brand, Amumu, stuff like that. Then I have found Redemption to be pretty good. But kind of like Locket, it just doesn't do a lot when it's on that cooldown. So if you're constantly just running around skirmishing, just fights everywhere, then something else might be a little bit better. Okay, let's get into the rest. So he's really good. Not a lot has changed as far as like Maokai and his itemization or even like his skill order. It's the same thing. He just has slightly lower stats. So you got to watch out for some all-ins. It's possible, maybe you need to build a little bit more armor to make up for your lack early on. But you almost always get Trailblazer because that movement speed is such a massive deal for Maokai. His major limiting factor is that his W is really short range. So if you want to get on somebody, you have to have that fast movement speed. And so this is perfect for him. It's way cheaper than Dead Man's Plate used to be, which is what he got before the new season. And allowing your allies to catch up to you with that 15% movement speed is really good too. So this is a major reason why he's doing so well is this item. And so you'd get that almost every game. And then typically something like Locket is going to be your next go-to. It's just really good. Provides a shield, and then Frozen Heart. It's the same thing as Rakan. Just depends on the situation where you want these things. But Locket is a safe bet if you're not sure as a second item. And then you're still just maxing your Q, then your W, then your E. The Q is just a lot of damage. Helps you out with a little bit of wave clear to help your ADC push if you need to. Low cooldown. Just that 1 point in E is going to give you really, really good scouting from a great distance. And then your W, of course, is going to give you more CC. So he's still really strong. It's great engage, great initiation. There's just not a lot wrong with Maokai. Other than him, he is a little bit squishier than some other tanks, and he doesn't have any escapes. So if you get flanked or caught out and there's just no way you can turn the fight around, you're going to die. So you got to be careful with that. But just his virtually guaranteed CC that he can provide is really strong. You can get bullied early on because you are low range. They did nerf his healing quite a bit last patch. So if you're up against that kind of stuff, the Zyras, Brands, Xeraths, all of that, then you can get blown out early on. But once you get 6, you have tremendous gank assist. A lot of those champions are not going to be able to run away from your R. And when you combine that R with your W and the jungler's there, it's just automatic death pretty much for any squishy champs. It's incredibly difficult to avoid. Okay, then we got Blitzcrank, and I know we've only got like a little bit longer here, so I'm just going to fly through these a bit more. Blitzcrank, same old stuff. You just run around hooking people. He also really likes the movement speed item, major beneficiary of Trailblazer, and it's the same thing. You're probably either going to go for Locket or Frozen Heart as your second item. I have been seeing more and more Blitzcranks get Swifties instead of Mobility Boots. Mobility Boots is going to let you rotate to situations faster, but Swifties do help against your own self slow off of your W. And if you're getting hit by slows or just in combat, you're trying to walk up and just, punch people more often, they can be good. But you aren't going to be able to rotate as fast. I don't know about those on Maokai. Like, that is really good for closing the gap. It's a very nice, like, offensive boot, but you're going to be a lot squishier if you get that on Maokai instead of, like, Mercury Treads. But just kind of depends on the situation. But yeah, Blitzcrank, great. Just, there's a lot of squishies out there, either mages or enchanters, and if you can just hook them consistently, they're going to die. So it's been the same thing since Season 1, same Blitzcrank. Tanks aren't incredibly popular right now outside of Maokai, and you can probably even kill him too, because he's pretty squishy in the early game. But you're not seeing a lot of, like, Alistars, Brahms, Leonas aren't as popular as they used to be, and so almost everybody's a good target. And there aren't a lot of tanks in other roles. In pro play, you're still seeing a decent amount of tanks, but in solo queue, everyone wants to try to carry, and, Braum can punish them pretty hard for that. Especially now that I feel like it's even easier to get vision everywhere and to fight for vision because there's, like, more bushes, more openings around the bot lane, and it's just a lot easier to rotate and catch people out, go in the jungle, mess with the jungler, even if you're on blue side, like invading red because of that new tri-bush. So I think a lot of kind of the map dynamics also favor Blitzcrank in many situations. Then you've got Senna. I still think she's really good. Her win rate's not incredibly high right now, but I think she's quite good into Rakan. I think she's pretty good into Maokai too, to a lesser extent. You can just kind of farm them in the early game. They don't put up that much pressure. Gonna be a little bit weak to Blitzcrank, but very good against a lot of the other, mainstream champs. She can get Umbral, which is really good at vision control. Still stacks up souls, does quite a bit of damage early on. Is a flex pick, could be, ADC, could be support, so that can kind of confuse people early on in the draft. And she can do quite a lot of damage later on in the game, and has a global to influence the map. So I think she's really good. You just have to be, very careful that she is squishy. If she gets flanked, she probably is going to die. I've even seen some tanky-ish Senna builds where I don't remember what all like the new items and things they're getting are, but it's just like some, ranged bruisery type of items that can be good on her. Like that, what is it, Sundered Sky, I think. I don't remember. I've seen her with a variety of builds be pretty effective. So I still think that she's good, but you got to be careful. She is squishy. Nautilus, still going to be really good. Extremely good in Pro right now. In solo queue, he is a little bit squishier than other champs, so I think some people get into trouble. They stay in to the fight too long after they land their hook. They just want to auto everybody, and they get blown up by a bunch of CC. But still has one of the biggest hitbox hooks in the game. They changed it a few patches ago to where it's a stun now instead of a root when you get hooked, so it's a lot harder to like blink out of it or do these like different mechanics to get out of the hook. So that's very nice. Guaranteed ult with the R. It's going to hit the target unless they have like Hourglass. It's incredibly consistent and effective CC and engage. Multiple pieces from long range. He does pretty respectable AoE damage if you get a lot of points in the E. And I know some people still max Q, some people max E. It just depends on the situation. But yeah, he's really, really good with a lot of the items. And he actually likes having that extra mana off of something like Frozen Heart, or even just off of your baseline tanky support item now. You're still going to get mana regen, versus in the past you didn't get that. And he's one of the few tanks that actually does care about mana quite a bit, especially if you're maxing E. His mana costs are pretty high. So, anyways, Nautilus can be very good, but you got to be careful with your engages. He's also one of the few tanks that can actually get away from situations by hooking onto walls and things like that. If you time that correctly, he can basically immune different pieces of CC and hook and get out of it. So, pretty high skill cap to do those types of things, to time it correctly, to get out of CC, but he can escape, unlike, Maokai, Leona, Alistar. He can actually get out in some situations easier than others. So I think he's quite good. If it's pro play, he's S-class, but for solo queue, I'll put him in A. And then Leona, very nice. Tons and tons of CC. Can't escape. Probably one of the tankiest in the early game with her W, especially with Aftershock and the way those kind of stack with each other. So she can tower dive, she can take minion hits really early, great with all of the mainstream tank items. Really low cooldown on the ult, it's only 90 seconds. Now, it's a lot easier to dodge that if they have mobility than something like a Maokai ult or a Nautilus ult, but you get a lot more shots at it. If they don't have mobility, you can be on top of them basically every time you walk to lane. It could be a kill if you're ahead. So, really powerful. I will say, though, Nautilus, a lot of his stuff has resistance to tenacity because the hook is going to, basically displace people, and then the ult is going to knock them airborne. So a lot of Nautilus's CC is not as affected by Mercury Treads or Cleanse, versus Leona can be cleansed, can be Merc Treaded. So that is one potential downside of Leona. But still very, very good if you want a hyper-aggressive option. And if you want to go over walls and things like that. There are fewer walls than there were in the past because of the new Tri-Bush in the bottom. But that is something that she can do that someone like Nautilus can't do as easily. And then, Melio is really good. I think he's one of the best enchanters at just, scaling and protecting. It kind of depends on what you need. He doesn't have a ton of peel, but he can cleanse CC and stuff like that. He's also very, very good in the early game with the trading with Aerie plus his W, the heal, plus the constant shields and the extra range and damage. It all just pairs so well with a lot of aggressive ADCs, your Caitlyn's, your Jins, stuff like that in the early game. So he does have quite a good early game. And his burst single target protection is insane with, later on in the game, if you get Moonstone, just the double shield plus your ultimate plus something like Redemption, it's just going to heal and shield him for, over 1,000. So very good. And he does have a decent amount of mobility, too, because he can use that shield to help himself, move and run away from stuff. And he can use that Q to displace and knock people back that are trying to dash on him. So I think Emilio's very, very good. He doesn't have a high win rate right now, but I think if you're proficient on him and you're looking for a scaling enchanter to work with your supports, I think he's really good. Okay. Unfortunately, I got to get out of here. I got to go pick up my daughters from daycare. But I will say the final thing is Lulu, her win rate is not as high, but like I talked about earlier, I think she can still be really good with the right picks. The Twitch, Kog'Maw, Jinx, like these hyperscaling champs. I think just because she got buffed, people are just kind of picking her into whatever. And I think that she does have a tough time with those range harassment champs early. But anyways, okay. Well, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Hope you enjoyed it. Sorry I had to cut it a little bit shorter than usual, but I really wanted to get this done today. I know a lot of people are looking forward to it. So let me know in the comments. What do you think? Is there been any new like breakout supports? Or anything that you think should be a little bit higher or lower, and come by, check out the stream. I'm happy to talk about it as well every night starting around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So thanks, have a good day, and I'll see you next time.